Well, Sam, thank you so much for being here with me on the Entrepreneurial Success Podcast. I know this has been a long one in the making, but we got there, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you on the sunny, sunny day here in the UK. So, before we get started, why don't I hand over to you first so you can introduce yourself to the audience and tell us what you do?
Thank you, Henriette, and thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to it for some time. So I call myself a female fatigue fighter, and I support women and workplaces to optimize energy, focus, and performance. Officially, I'm a registered nutritional therapist, but nobody knows what that is. So, and it's not just about nutrition. It's a root cause approach, which is looking at the underlying drivers of someone's symptoms, and that can be nutrition, sleep, stress, digestion, hormones, genetics. So it's not just about nutrition, but we're stuck with a name, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I'm sure everybody listening now is going, yeah, we can do with a little bit more energy on a daily basis.
Oh, yes, yes.
But how did you get started in nutrition? What kind of led you to be where you are now?
Well, very much my own personal story. So this is my second career. So out of uni, I went into marketing and I was in corporate marketing, travel and loyalty, retail for 22 years. And back in 2013, I got a diagnosis of post-viral ME chronic fatigue syndrome, which was a huge shock. But looking back, the year before I got that diagnosis, I was working in a corporate environment. I was doing a big relaunch of a local loyalty program for Heathrow Airport. And I had a lot going on at work, lots of stress, lots of things to do. I was working full time. My daughter was 6 at the time. There was also a lot going on at home. So tons of stress I could see now, work and home life, demanding job, burning the candle at each end, burning out. And then a couple of viruses got me, norovirus followed by flu on Christmas. And I went straight back to work in January and carried on pushing through. And after about 6 months, I started to collapse when I got home from the sofa, on the sofa when I got home from work. I'd be in meetings and I'd be thinking, my brain is just not following this. And I even remember sitting in my car after a working day with my head between my knees because I was so nauseous I couldn't actually drive home. And that's what led me to the doctor. Unfortunately, I was diagnosed quite quickly, but there is no treatment per se for these kind of conditions. So there followed a period of 2 years of being signed off work, trying to go back, stopping, going back, resting, and eventually got them to make me redundant. So I left on, then thought, what am I going to do now? I need to get better. And that's when I came across nutritional therapy. And I studied really to heal myself, and I did it over a long period at my own pace while I was recovering. And I learned things on the very first day of college, Henriette, which were a game changer in my recovery. But I also knew at the end of those 4 years, I'd be able to help others. And that's kind of my mission now. It's about helping others live life with more energy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love your story. And you know what? I find it fascinating that, yes, we do get those moments where things feel like a rug has been pulled out from underneath us.
Mm,
But those are all life lessons as well. We kind of pave the way for the future for what it is that you're going to work towards at the
absolutely,
end of the day.
absolutely. And I worked with
Yeah.
a practitioner at the time, and when you get a diagnosis of any chronic illness, you start catastrophizing. So what if I don't get better? What if I lose my job? What am I going to do? Will I work again? You have all of that. And she said to me, I remember it to this day, what if it's the best thing that's ever happened to you? And she was right, because it's led me to a new career, really fulfilling, challenging, but really rewarding.
Yeah. And you know what? I know there's so many people in the audience that is listening to your story and completely shaking their heads, agreeing with you, because I'm sure
Yeah,
that in many ways, there are some of us who's had similar experiences
yeah,
whereby you just feel like you got to keep going, you got to keep going. But then somehow
yeah.
things will just stop and tell you, okay, enough is enough. You've got
Yeah,
to make a
absolutely. Yeah,
change
body
now.
says no, absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have the book in my bookshelf.
So let's talk about this a little bit. So,
Mm,
obviously, as a nutritional therapist and with all your experience that you have, one of the things that we are going to focus on is the energy in particular. But let's go
yeah,
back a little bit and let's talk about hormones because you did mention that they play a huge role. So,
yeah,
how do hormones work in particular?
yeah. Well, I think the key hormones I'm thinking about here are estrogen and our female hormones, and menopause gets lots of attention, quite rightly so, because it's a big part of our lives. It's a natural transition. Um, But obviously there's so much more to our hormones. They don't work in isolation. They communicate with each other and they impact each other. So I work predominantly with kind of midlife women, kind of 35 upwards. And there are three kind of key hormones that work very closely together. So your female hormones, your thyroid hormones, and your stress hormones. And I like to imagine them as a little triangle. So thyroid's here, the stress hormones are here, and the female hormones are here. And when everything is hunky-dory and there's no stress and life is wonderful, that triangle is perfectly shaped. But if your stress starts to rise, and especially chronically, it will impact your thyroid function. It will impact your hormone production. What will happen if the thyroid, if you're prone to thyroid disease, you've got it in the family, when the thyroid gets wonky, the stress hormones can pick up the pace. So within this triangle, those three key areas are talking to each other. The arrows go both ways. So as an example, for instance, so if you're chronically stressed, your brain does not know if you've got to run away from a tiger, or you've got a lot on your plate at work, or you're spinning plates at home. It just knows it's got to protect you. There's no time to make a baby, so the estrogen production gets switched off. So, periods go wonky, the mood goes all over the place. So they're very much intertwined, and they're kind of communicating with each other all the time. So whenever I'm working with exhausted women in midlife, I'm looking at all three of those pillars, if you like, to figure out which ones are at play, which ones need to be addressed and supported.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because when you hear people talk about hormones, the first thing is you would just naturally think about the female or the male hormones. But
Yes,
there's
exactly.
so much more to it. And I'm sure there's a lot more detail. But then now that we understand what these three hormones are and how they kind of work together, how can we achieve harmony with our hormones? Because at the end goal, we do want more energy at the end of the day. But how does that triangle get into that harmonious rhythm so that we can sustain or at least have more energy on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think one key area is trying to figure out which hormone area is under pressure. And I have a great visual I use in clinic, which is a Venn diagram with those three areas. And the symptoms in the middle are common to all three areas. So we've talked about fatigue, sleep issues, obviously, which cause energy, brain fog, weight gain, joints and muscles, mood, brain fog, all of that. They are symptoms of all three: chronic stress, perimenopause, and thyroid. So I often work with women who've gone to the doctors with these symptoms. They're over 40. I'll just give you some HRT. They might feel a bit better, but not where they want to be, because nobody's looked at their thyroid. And when we look at it, it's very much about, that the thyroid is sluggish or it's underactive and it's not working as strongly. And, much like estrogen, there are receptors on all of your cells in the body for thyroid. So is your brain fog menopause brain, or is it thyroid brain, or is it a bit of both? So testing can be really useful, and I use thyroid testing a lot because it's so fundamental to your energy, your brain, your weight regulation. So I say to women, especially if you've got thyroid in the family, really important to get tested. And you can do this at home with a finger prick test with MediCheck, so it's really available. So testing is useful to figure out, especially, if that thyroid is an issue and if there's chronic stress, thinking about that. But in terms of the kind of day-to-day things that you can do to support your harmony, so one key one is blood sugar balance. And again, many of your listeners will be aware that it's important to balance blood sugar. We do that by having protein. We do that by having good fats with all our meals. But when it comes to hormones, is when your blood sugar is low, not only is your energy on the floor, your brain is saying, where's the food gone? And it's right, I need to get that stored glucose from the muscles. Adrenaline and cortisol, that's your job. So blood sugar is low, stress hormones get released to mobilize stored glucose. So you've got more stress hormones that you probably don't need. And if your blood sugar drops in the middle of the night, it's often the reason we wake up at 3 a.m. like this, wired. So if any listeners are waking up pretty much same time every day, got wired and thinking, why am I feeling kind of wired and adrenaline? Pop down to the fridge, have a couple of spoonfuls of yogurt. Not cheese, because that can give you things. But I often say to people, have a look at what you're eating that last meal of the day. Is there enough protein in it to keep your blood sugar stable throughout the night? And it's often quite an easy fix for many people. I mentioned protein, its other key role when it comes to hormones. They're the building blocks of many of our hormones, not all of them. Some of the female hormones are made of cholesterol and lipids, but you need protein, are the building blocks of life generally. And again, it's probably the number one thing most of my clients struggle with. Even if they're eating well, they've got balanced meals, there's no rubbish, no ultra processed foods, very little alcohol, there's just not enough protein. So again, I say to people, protein, 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 but also protein and plants is the other side of things. And where the plants come in, and in terms of hormone regulation, is the plant foods, the fibers, their plant chemicals support your lovely healthy gut bacteria, and as well as talking to your brain with the gut-brain axis, they are also converting your thyroid hormone. They're managing your estrogen. They're looking after your happy hormone, serotonin. So we really need to keep those friendly gut bugs nice and happy with lots of plants. Yeah.
My gosh, it's so interesting because I think it's at the end of the day, we're just human bodies. We're here, we're operating on a daily basis, but we do not know always how closely related nutrition is, our gut health is to the hormones, to balancing those hormones. And as you were talking about, eating enough protein, as an example, and I'm just going to share this outrightly here. Last night, I had a beautiful salad, lots of greens, but I had some hard-boiled eggs in the salad.
Excellent. Yeah.
And that was perfect. I didn't feel like I needed more. But you know what? I will say this, whether I was tired or whether it was the protein, because there was quite a few hard-boiled eggs, I slept like a baby. And I woke up this morning feeling so refreshed. So it's interesting that you say that, because yes, there are mornings when you wake up 3 a.m., 5 a.m., whatever that time might be. But it's interesting now that I look back at it and go like, oh yeah, I didn't eat enough protein the previous day. And that's why I kept waking up sometimes so early in the morning. Yeah.
And it tends to be the first thing I recommend to most clients. And then when we have our check-in 2 weeks later, and how are you getting on? And they're like, I can't believe how much more energy I've got just by upping my protein. And especially switching from those sweet breakfasts that we've often been brought up on, if you're born in a certain decades, to having that protein, eggs, sardines in the morning, especially for midlife women. It really, and the adrenals need food. So to calm your stress response, it's good to eat within an hour of waking up, because otherwise the brain goes, right, where's the food? I'm hungry. Where's the stress hormones? So even if people don't have an appetite, eating something small, like you say, like a boiled egg on some toast, you don't have to have a full English breakfast, but eating within an hour of getting up helps to keep your nervous system nice and happy. It knows the food is coming.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love this. See, now even I learned something today.
Well, I think the other area I haven't mentioned, Henriette, is the liver. So our liver is processing everything we eat, everything we drink, toxins, medications, stress hormones, all of our hormones. And when life is throwing everything at it, the liver is like, well, I've got quite a lot to do. I don't need any more things. But from a hormonal point of view, it converts your thyroid hormone into its active form that drives your energy and your brain and your work and your metabolism. And it gets rid of excess estrogen. So any kind of PMS type symptoms, headaches, sore boobs, bloating, cramps, those are signs that the estrogen is not being cleared properly through the liver. So things that help the liver are the cruciferous veg, for instance, brilliant foods for midlife women. That's the broccoli, the cauliflower, the sprouts, if you like them, cabbage, that kind of thing. They also contain sulfur, which is needed for the liver to kind of process the toxins. So, and also things like garlic and onions, beetroot, all good for the liver there. And good fats, we need good fats. And a lot of women, again, especially if you're born in the 70s, 80s, fat is bad. Let's take all the fat out of food and bung a load of sugar in. Different problem altogether. But we need the good fats for our cells, for our energy. So, the olive oils, extra virgin, avocado, the nuts and the seeds, and oily fish. So we do need the good fats, and women often shy away from them.
My gosh, it's so interesting how our bodies operate and how it all works together. But again, it's what we don't know, right? And this is why I'm loving this conversation with you, because like I said, not only does the audience learn something, but I took something interesting away from today. But at the end of the day, I mean, we are talking about hormones a lot. And like I said, most people would go like, okay, when we talk about hormones, they immediately think about women hormones. So with all of this said, does this only affect women, or does men also get affected with all the hormones?
Not as much, because obviously they don't have the huge kind of fluctuations in hormones that we do. So, and there's an interesting fact actually that women are biologically wired to be more sensitive to stress. And this goes back to our cave people days, because our DNA is still cave people, to be fair. So, men have more testosterone, so that fighting masculine strength energy, often in a more of a fight and flight. You can imagine them protecting the tribe, going out and fighting off the predators, that kind of thing. Women, we do have some testosterone, but we're much more on the estrogen and progesterone side, and that's about the tend and protect. Our kind of, our roles were, keeping the human population going, looking after children, etc. So we'd have a very, very different kind of hormone profile. And the research shows, and has shown for decades, that women are more susceptible to thyroid conditions. It affects women far more than men. And again, stress is a big driver of thyroid dysfunction and autoimmunity. And again, I'm a perimenopausal woman with a thyroid condition and a history of chronic fatigue and burnout. So I've got all the three there. And again, with the kind of chronic fatigue, ME, long COVID, again, the research shows that women are much, much, much more susceptible to these kind of chronic fatigue-related conditions.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting, that difference between us, but it also makes a lot more sense then as to why we as nurturers need to look after ourselves.
Yeah. And I think, obviously the role of women has changed significantly even over the last kind of two generations. So, my grandmother would have, probably got married and stopped working. She would have worked in the home. My mum, again, she gave up working to support us, and then she used to work at home, to bring some money in. But obviously a lot of us now are working full time, where we've got families, we've got parents, husbands, and we're doing a lot more than a woman kind of 50, 80 years ago would have been doing.
Yeah. So again, just adds to the stress again, and it's a whole vicious circle. But I do love this, because I think, at the end of the day, it comes back down to just that triangle that you shared about making sure there's harmony between the hormones. And how to do that is to start with your own nutrition. So obviously understanding, especially, which hormone is affected, if any, and then how to use nutrition in order to create that harmony and that balance. And I love that, because yes, it is interesting. Yes, is it hard? Maybe. Do you have to make it difficult for yourself? No.
No. And I think the other area, Henriette, is that, because we are so busy, we can often, and again, I'm guilty of this, and I have those kind of perfectionist A-type tendencies that I need to rein back, is, we can never get rid of or eradicate stress from our lives. It's a stressful place, but we can minimize it where possible, and we can improve our resilience to it. Much like we can improve our immune resilience, we can increase our resilience. So alongside the nutrition, it's like, well, actually, how can you build in some time for you, whether it's yoga, whether it's getting out for a walk in the sunshine for 15 minutes a day, whether it's breathing, if that's your thing, or meditation. And many of these things actually clinically researched to reduce cortisol levels. But on a much smaller level, things like, watching funny programs. I mean, I don't have the news on. The world is a scary place. And I say to people, it's important to keep in touch with what's going on, but you choose when you do that. You choose when you log in or you watch the news. So when I'm getting ready in the morning, I have Frasier on the television. I've seen it millions of times. It makes me laugh, but I start the day kind of with some joy. And we were talking just before about sitting in the garden and just looking at the trees or looking at the clouds. Even kind of 10-15 minutes throughout the day can really kind of start to bring those levels back down. And I guess a final point about how kind of nutrition or not impacts your stress hormones. So alcohol and caffeine in particular will amplify stress hormones. So what do we do when we're stressed? Often we will grab a coffee to keep going, and that caffeine will make us kind of feel more stressful. And there was a really interesting study a while back where they took two groups of people, and they gave some alcohol before bed and some coffee. And what they did is they kind of linked them up to a monitor on their fingers, and they went to sleep, and they monitored their heart rate while they were asleep. And in both cases, the people were asleep, but they were in fight and flight, so their stress hormones were elevated.
Oh,
So
interesting.
if you've ever gone out for a few drinks, or had a few drinks at dinner, and you go to bed and you feel like you've been in bed for 8 hours, but you feel rubbish. It's often because of that, but also your liver's probably going, oh, this toxic alcohol, I've got to get rid of this. But then weirdly, some people can have an espresso at night and go to bed and sleep like a baby, but that often comes down to genetics. So we're very, very biologically and biochemically complex. And unfortunately, conventional medicine has to be simplistic and black and white because it's talking to millions and millions of people. But obviously, there's a lot more nuance, a lot more stuff going on under the bonnet for each of us.
Yeah. And I think this is the beauty with you as a nutritionist for each and every one of us, because we're so unique. The best thing to do is to start going to you, have those conversations, and then do the tests. And then based on the findings, then obviously you have a better idea of what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And I know there are a lot of people who just eat stuff and they think it's the good stuff, and then it actually doesn't really work for them because it's got some sort of other effect in their body. So I always find nutritionists so interesting to talk to. And honestly, I love this conversation in itself, and we can talk for many more hours.
And I think that's why I love the one-to-one work so much, is that it's the detective work. It's the right, this person is struggling with fatigue and brain fog and headaches. There can be numerous causes of each of those symptoms. So which ones apply to this person? Which one can we test for? Which can we rule out? Which ones do we address first? Because you can't do everything all at the same time. So it's my job to stand back and think, right, what's going on for this person? What's been happening to them since the day they were born that's led them to this? And how do we very gently support those areas in a phased approach to start to bring them back to kind of full energy?
And I love this conversation. Honestly, it's given me a lot of ideas as well. But in particular, I think to make it very easy for everybody here listening, you also have a free guide on how to create some very easy but good lunches. Because like we said earlier on, as women in particular, we're so busy, run down to the kitchen, grab something quick, and it might not be the right thing for you, especially if you're low in energy. So tell us a little bit about this guide, and I'll make sure to put the link in the details for everybody to go and download it.
So it came about really as, obviously, when I'm working with people, what are they most struggling with? And most people know they need to eat protein, and they need the plants, and they need to have regular meals, but knowing isn't enough. You've got to have the time to actually put it into place and have some guidance. So this one particularly focuses on kind of 5-minute lunches. So many of the things that you can buy the ingredients in and you assemble them. So you can assemble them in the morning and take them with you to work, or you can have them at home. So they're super quick. There are some snacks in there as well. So there's a few, quite a good variety of different lunch recipes there, with store cupboard and fridge ingredients. So you're not kind of standing over a stove most of the time. And there's more kind of support in there about blood sugar and why it's important. So it's not just the recipes, but there is some guidance and a bit of background. So in the work I do, it's not enough to say to people, right, you need to do this. It's, well, why do you need to do this? How is it supporting your body and your symptoms and your well-being? So why is this happening? What are we going to do about it? But also, this is the how.
Yeah. And I love that. I'm intrigued as well, because I find myself sometimes sitting here going, oh, I need to eat something, but I need to be quick. And then rush down and just grab whatever I see, which normally is the easiest thing, but not the healthiest. So
and you mentioned boiled eggs, and they're great. You can boil those up at the beginning of the week. They last about 5 days. And if you're really, really pushed on time, maybe not one for the workplace, but if you're really pushed on time, you can just grab a bag of salad and an egg and just chop it up and put a bit of olive oil on it. Bob's your uncle.
I know. See, now I'm starving, so now I'm definitely going to go and have a boiled egg.
This is the lunchtime session, isn't it? Yes. I ate before I came on.
Brilliant. Oh, listen, Sam, this was absolutely wonderful. So for those of you listening to this episode, and if anything that Sam has mentioned here has kind of struck a chord with you, or you're a little bit curious yourself and thinking like, hey, I'm experiencing more of those moments where I've got no energy, or I feel like there's a complete lack of energy, my suggestion is go and get in contact with Sam, maybe have a conversation with her if you feel inclined to do so, because Again, at the end of the day, it's the more you know about yourself, the better you can make those decisions, alongside with what Sam obviously mentioned here today. And if you just want to start taking those small steps, go and download the free guide so that you can look at your lunches, maybe think a little bit better about what it is that you're putting into your body, and obviously look after your hormones. So with that said, all the details to connect with Sam, her website, her social media details will be in the show notes. But of course, you can also make sure to connect with Sam if you wanted to have that conversation. So in addition to everything you've just said, Sam, I just wanted to say thank you so much. It's been so wonderful to have you on the podcast. And thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise. I'm sure everybody here is just thrilled and want to know more, so they'll be in touch.
It was great to be here. Thank you, Henriette. I really enjoyed our chat.
You're very welcome. I'll be in touch soon.
Okay, bye-bye.